let's just jump right into it. Today in this explainer, we're cracking open what honestly feels like a closely guarded secret in business, the true hidden cost of manufacturing a consumer good. We're not doing broad industry averages today, no way. We're gonna track actual raw material, literally every single thread of it, from the factory floor all the way to the retail shelf. We're accounting for absolutely every cent.
So picture this. You walk into a high-end athletic apparel store. You pick up this premium sports t-shirt, flip the tag, and boom, $280. It's a premium product, right? Promising high performance. But honestly, as consumers or even as business owners, we kind of rarely stop to ask what that price tag actually represents.
Well, contrast that $280 with this number, $72.43. Yep. That is the meticulously calculated true manufacturing cost of that exact same premium t-shirt. I mean, it's a massive gap, isn't it? That instant gap between the retail price and the manufacturing cost. That's the puzzle we're putting together today.
So the big question is, how do we actually get there? How do we account for every single cent that bridges a pile of raw material to a slick, packaged product? We're going to follow the money. Think of it like a detective journey through a process costing system, tracking exactly how value snowballs as a product moves down an assembly line. To pull this off, we're using a comprehensive case study grounded in real-world accounting principles. Let me introduce you to our company, Mexican Sports Textiles. We've got a single, laser-focused mission here. We are tracking their production for the month of August 2026, and during this month, they kicked off the production of exactly 10,000 sports t-shirts.
All right, section 1, 3 steps to a shirt starting right on the factory floor. Let's dive right in. We're going to physically walk a massive pile of raw polyester through the factory. In process costing, costs are captured at each distinct phase of production before moving on to the next. So the flow here is broken down into 3 physical steps. Step 1 is spinning. That's where raw polyester fiber becomes usable yarn. Step 2 is weaving, where that yarn gets knitted into large rolls of fabric. And finally, step 3 is finishing. That's where the fabric is cut, sewn, and transformed into the actual t-shirts. And here's the kicker. Costs accumulate heavily at every single one of these steps. Let's start with the first department and see how this whole thing builds. In the spinning process, the company inputs $180,000 in raw materials. Then add in $60,000 for the direct labor to run the machines and $40,000 in indirect manufacturing costs. You know, things like factory electricity and equipment maintenance. So right out of the gate, the spinning process has gathered an initial $280,000 in costs, just to get us to the yarn stage. Now watch the snowball effect. That $280,000 doesn't just vanish, it rolls straight into the weaving department. Weaving receives that baseline cost, and then, well, it adds its own expenses. $40,000 in additional materials, $70,000 in labor, and $50,000 in indirect costs. So our total accumulated cost has now bulked up to $440,000. Finally, the rolls of fabric move over to the finishing department, and yep, they bring that $440,000 price tag right along with them. Finishing adds $70,000 in final materials, things zippers, tags, that sort of thing, a massive $120,000 in direct sewing labor, and $90,000 in indirect costs. So our physical journey from raw fiber to finished sports t-shirts brings our total accumulated manufacturing cost for the month to a grand total of $720,000. But hold on. Here's where we hit a massive accounting puzzle. Our factory started with 10,000 shirts, right? But at the end of August, only 9,500 shirts were actually completely finished. 500 shirts are still stuck on the assembly line in various states of completion. So, how do you accurately assign that $720,000 total cost when some of your products are literally only half finished? This introduces an absolutely vital concept called equivalent production. Honestly, it's the only logical way to put a price tag on a shirt that only has one sleeve sewn on. Simply put, equivalent production means expressing a larger number of partially completed units as a smaller number of fully completed units, all based on the effort you've already put into them. Let's look at how the math actually plays out. For those 500 unfinished shirts, all the physical materials are already there, so they're 100% complete for materials, which means 500 equivalent units. Easy. But for labor and indirect costs, they're only 60% complete. Well, 60% of 500 is 300. So in terms of labor and overhead effort, those 500 half-finished shirts mathematically equal exactly 300 fully completed shirts. Add that to our 9,500 finished ones, and we base our labor costs on exactly 9,800 equivalent units. And that clever equivalent unit trick, that gets us right back to our opening hook. When we divide our massive departmental costs by our equivalent units, we get those precise per shirt costs. $44 transferred in, $7 for materials, $12.24 for labor, and $9.18 for indirect costs. Add them all up, and boom, our precise unit cost is exactly $72.43 per finished t-shirt.
Okay, moving to section 2. Tracking the money flow, or as I like to call it, the financial twin.
Now that we've physically built the shirts and nailed down that unit cost, let's shift gears and step into the financial ledger. Look at it this way. Every physical movement has a financial twin that mirrors the chronological journey we just took. Value flows from raw materials into the spinning process, gathers mass and weaving, and maxes out at $720,000 in finishing. But notice that final jump? Only the cost of the completely finished products, those 9,500 shirts, actually moves out of the factory, and that equals $688,071.43.
In the accounting world, we record this dynamic whoosh of value transferring off the factory floor and into the finished goods warehouse through debits and credits. We credit the finishing department's work in process account, which essentially removes that $688,000 of value, and we debit the finished products account, putting that exact value safely onto the warehouse shelves. And the final financial movement? That happens when those shirts actually leave the building entirely. Our company managed to sell 8,500 of those t-shirts in August. So we take 8,500, multiply it by our magic unit cost of $72.43, and we move $615,642 out of the finished products warehouse and straight into our cost of sales. Which brings us to section 3, the final financial scorecard for August 2026. This is the ultimate climax of our detective journey. This isn't just some boring spreadsheet. This is the final proof of why tracking every cent down to the decimal point on the factory floor matters so much to the executives in the boardroom. Just look at this massive, satisfying contrast. We sold 8,500 shirts at that premium retail price of $280 each. That generated an incredible $2,380,000 in sales revenue. We subtract our rigorously tracked cost of sales, that's $615,000, and we're left with a staggering gross profit of over $1.7 million. But of course, running a business isn't just about factory costs, right? We also have to quickly deduct our operating expenses to find the true bottom line. The company spent $50,000 on sales expenses, like advertising, and $30,000 on administrative expenses, just keeping the corporate lights on. So that's $80,000 in total operating expenses to subtract from our gross profit. Unveiling our final operating profit, $1,684,357.14. Literally, this massive success is exactly why that initial process costing was so absolutely critical. Because management knew their unit cost was strictly controlled at $72.43, they had the confidence to price their product, spend on marketing, and ultimately generate over $1.6 million in pure operating profit in a single month. Which really leaves us with this final thought. We just watched how rigorously tracking equivalent units and cost transfers transformed a messy pile of raw polyester into a highly predictable, incredibly profitable financial machine. So, if tracking every cent on a factory floor can yield this level of insight and control, what hidden profits could you uncover in your own business processes if you applied this same level of meticulous tracking? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for the hidden value in the everyday.